All right. Big matchup this Saturday coming up. Dillian Whyte versus Joseph Parker. I know a lot of people are excited about this fight, and I'm excited about this fight as well. On paper, these two guys look to match up as a 50-50 fight. And I know some people think that this fight could be a barn burner. And, you know, it very well could be, or it could be more or less a tactical battle because we've seen Joseph Parker try to slow down the pace of the fight, move a lot, stay out of range, kind of peck away at opponents before. And in the Joshua fight, in his last fight, I thought he made a good account of himself. I gave him 4 rounds. Some people gave him 5 rounds. But he didn't make a total commitment offensively to really try to put it on Anthony Joshua. So, you know, a lot of people think that he didn't throw enough punches, and he may have even fought somewhat tentative. And I think Joshua fought tentative in the beginning of that fight, but he stepped it up a little bit and pushed Joseph Parker back, and he was the one that was more aggressive in the later rounds. But if you really look at the fight, you know, no one really had a dominant round in that fight. You know, Joseph Parker would nick rounds, Anthony Joshua would nick rounds. Later in the fight, maybe Anthony Joshua pulled away in some of these rounds. But for the most part, Joseph Parker fought very well defensively, moved his head a lot, knew how to get out of range after throwing his combinations. So he would step in, throw combinations, work off his jab well, land some good right hands over Joshua's sometimes lazy jab and inconsistent jab. And he would, you know, step off to the side, step back, and then step off to the side. So he was very successful at using the ring and not putting himself in too much danger in that fight. So Joseph Parker definitely is a good boxer. He can move well. He's got quick feet, and he's got a good jab. And for the most part, I think he's an excellent all-around fighter. But he likes to use distance. He likes to throw those straight shots down the pike, and I think his best punch is his straight right hand right down the pike, which he sets up beautifully off that jab. That jab that he throws is a real deterrent. It's a real rhythm buster for his opponents, and he really uses it well to set up that right hand and camouflage that right hand and kind of throw an off-speed right hand at times because that jab is just there. And it's pecking and pecking and pecking, and then out of nowhere the right hand comes. So it's almost like a pitcher throwing changeups. You know, he likes to use the right hand a lot, but it's hard for opponents to pick up on timing that right hand because he changes up the speed and rhythm on it so much, and he you know, is so good at setting up behind that jab. Whereas Dillian Whyte is a guy who I feel is more or less a mid-range guy who really has a beautiful left hook. And he likes to punch with his opponents. So, you know, when guys open up with him, he's punching with them. And, you know, he's a lot of times getting inside their combinations, and he's getting there first when he's fighting slower opponents. So we've seen him even in the Anthony Joshua fight, which I thought he was losing every round in that fight except for the 6th, where he ended up hurting Joshua. But if you really look at that, Joshua was throwing a lazy right hand, and Dillian Whyte was close enough where he could, you know, punch inside Joshua's right hand and get there first. So Joshua threw it slowly, and Dillian Whyte was close enough where he could just throw that left hook right inside it, almost like a 45-degree type punch, and threaded the needle against Anthony Joshua. But the key to being able to do that is he had to be close. He had to be in that mid-range area. And for the most part, Joshua kept that fight at a distance, and he was very successful at landing jabs and long right hands from the outside. But Joshua himself, more or less, is a mid-range guy who relies on that left hook and that 45 half uppercut, half hook on the mid-range area too. So I think there's a lot of similarities between Joshua and Dillian Whyte, but I just think that you know, Joshua is a bigger, stronger version of Dillian Whyte when he's in the mid-range area, because they both tend to like to throw those uppercuts and those hooks in the mid-range area, and that's where they seem to be most comfortable and most effective. whereas Joseph Parker throws the straighter punches from the outside. He can just gauge distance very well, stop, and he can pop. He's not really stepping into all his shots. Some guys can just stop and pop and just shift their hips into shots, whereas other guys like to really be front foot heavy and, you know, lean forward into shots. And I think Anthony Joshua and Dillian Whyte are the types of fighters where they don't just stop and pop. They don't always like throw those long punches where they like to get full extension. They throw the mid-range loopy shots, hybrid type shots, half hook, half uppercut type shots, and short, choppy right hands on the inside. Whereas Joseph Parker throws those straighter shots, and he's more of a guy that likes to use range as opposed to stay in that mid-range area of the pocket. So he'll stop, pop, and then he'll step off, you know, slide back and step off to the side. Where Joshua and Dillian Whyte, they love that forward momentum. They like to move forward. They like to try to walk guys down, and they like to apply pressure. But sometimes I find that Dillian Whyte looks for that perfect shot sometimes. Sometimes he has lapses in fights where he's really not a high volume guy. He's not putting forth a sustained attack. And you could sometimes say that about Joseph Parker, where, you know, he'll throw one or two shots and he'll just, you know, step outside, reset. And, you know, he's not always committed to being really offensive. But I think in the Hughie Fury fight, I think that, you know, he threw a lot of punches in that fight. I think he really put on a good performance against Hughie Fury, and I think he outworked Hughie Fury. But, you know, this fight, I think, is going to be a very interesting matchup because it's going to be very intriguing on figuring out and wondering who's going to be able to implement their style over the other. And I think from a technical standpoint, I think Joseph Parker is just an all-around better boxer than Dillian Whyte. I think he's a lot more solid in the defensive department. I think he doesn't get hit as much. I think he moves his head well. I think he moves better than Dillian Whyte. He can fight on the back foot very well. He's an effective counterpuncher, where I think Dillian Whyte really isn't a classic counterpuncher per se. As I said, he likes to punch with you. He likes to get inside your combinations. He likes to get there first, and, you know, he can drop down on the body as well. But for the most part, I think he's a mid-range guy, where Joseph Parker is a little bit of everything, but you know, he's really successful on the outside. So I think Joseph Parker's jab and right hand especially is going to be key in this fight. So this, to me, is going to be a battle of the right hand versus the left hook. So this the straight right hand down the pike versus that left hook, which you need to be in that mid-range area really to be successful landing that left hook. Because I think Dillian Whyte isn't always committed to throwing the jab, isn't always committed to setting up shots sometimes. Sometimes he likes to, you know, barrel forward and, you know, leap in with wide shots and load up with wide looping shots when he gets impatient. So I can see him getting impatient in this fight because Joseph Parker's not just going to stand there in front of him. He's not going to oblige him. He's not going to get in the slugfest that Dillian Whyte is looking for. More or less like Lucas Brown just came forward and he was throwing bombs with Dillian Whyte, but obviously he was a lot slower than Dillian Whyte, so Dillian Whyte's punches got there faster, so he was able to punch with Lucas Brown and get there first, and he was able to be real effective with body shots and then coming over the top with his hooks and short looping right hands over the top and uppercuts as well in that fight. Threw a beautiful uppercut in that fight. We all know what happened there. But this fight is going to be, I think, very difficult for Dillian Whyte because he's going to have to come forward and he's going to have to track down Joseph Parker, who never stands in front of you for too long. And also, I think Joseph Parker will be able to land that right hand when Dillian Whyte tries to land that looping left hook in this fight. So I think that Dillian Whyte may get a little bit over anxious in this fight, may get a little bit too overly aggressive in this fight, and I think a patient, more cerebral Joseph Parker will be able to outbox Dillian Whyte. I don't really see this fight ending in a knockout. I'm not saying it's not impossible. I could see Joseph Parker landing so many right hands and probably maybe have an accumulative effect on Dillian Whyte, because I really think that Joseph Parker is the guy who has the faster hands and the faster feet. May not be as heavy hitter as Dillian Whyte, but I think he's defensively responsible enough where he's not going to allow Dillian Whyte to really put together any solid combinations in this fight. I just don't think he's going to stand there long enough for Dillian Whyte to set up shop in that mid-range area and really load up with those body shots and that left hook at close range. So I think Joseph Parker will be able to use the ring very well in this fight. I think he'll stick and move a lot, and I think you'll see him landing a lot of clean, flush right hands, over the top of Dillian Whyte when he swings wide with that left hook. And I honestly see him putting on a clinic in this fight, believe it or not. I don't really think this is a 50-50 fight. I know on paper it is, and I know the odds makers have this really close. But I just think Joseph Parker is the more skilled of the two. I think he's more well-rounded, and I think his outside game will be able to overcome Dillian Whyte's mid-range game. So I see Joseph Parker winning this fight like 9-3, 9-3-ish, in my opinion. That's how I see it. But the one caveat here is, Joseph Parker has to be consistent here. He can't go into lulls. I mean, we already know Dillian Whyte can go into lulls looking for that perfect shot, loading up. So in those moments, that's when Joseph Parker needs to score with the jab, and he needs to score with the right hand. He needs to get his combinations off. He doesn't have to stay in there and slug, but he needs to make a statement. He has to keep Dillian Whyte honest. He has to make Dillian Whyte think twice about moving forward and taking those chances. And then he needs to make Dillian Whyte be hesitant, and that's where he'll be able to get off first, land his combinations, and then he can move out, step off to the side, reset, and wash, rinse, and repeat, start all over again, and just kind of do that throughout the course of this fight. And I think he'll win rounds. But the thing is if he gets too economical in this fight, like he did in the second half of the fight with Anthony Joshua, even if he's nicking rounds, because Dillian Whyte is going to be the home fighter, the house fighter, the matchroom fighter, and he's already being mentioned as a possible opponent for Anthony Joshua in April. So it's not out of the realm of possibility to have that black cloud of suspicion in this fight, whereas if the rounds are even remotely close, that he won't get the nod in these close rounds. So if he just nicks rounds, that still leaves enough room for debate where, if the judges can say, hey, this is a round that we could possibly give to Dillian Whyte. In my opinion, I think that there's going to be a subconscious bias there, because Dillian Whyte is the house fighter. He's the named fighter, and he's probably going to be getting the crowd support in the fight from whatever he does. So I think that Joseph Parker really needs to be consistent with his offense. He cannot go into these lulls where he's just not doing much. He's just moving, pecking and moving. He's got to land some really clean right hands in there. He's got to land some telling blows where Dillian Whyte's head's snapping back. I'm not saying he's got to swing for the fences, but he is a clean, accurate puncher, and he can throw those straight shots. And usually those straight shots are always going to get there first before those looping shots, which are the ones that Dillian Whyte throws. And Joseph Parker has the quicker hands. So when he's got a punch in combination in this fight, he can't throw one punch at a time. He can't afford to just peck with the jab and just land one or two shots at a time. If he can slip in that third or fourth shot, then he needs to do that in this fight, and he has to be conscious of the situation. And I think he will be conscious of the situation. I think he realizes he was too economical in the second half of that Joshua fight, and that was a bad showing for him in the second half, in his opinion. And I think that most of us can agree with that as well. So he knows he has to do more in this fight. So I think he'll make a committed effort to do more. And I think skill for skill, I honestly believe that he is the better boxer all around. And I think he has more tools in the toolbox to win this fight. And I think he'll be landing the cleaner punches. He'll be landing more punches. And if he does not get careless, which he really doesn't have a tendency to do, then he should win this fight. We've seen Dillian Whyte take unnecessary chances. We've seen Dillian Whyte get over anxious. We've seen Dillian Whyte sometimes wait for the perfect shot, and while he's waiting, he's getting hit. So, you know, but all those things being said, I think that adds up to a Joseph Parker unanimous decision victory. I'm going with him. He should win this fight around like 117, 111, as I said earlier. I'm looking forward to the fight. I'd love to hear you guys' thoughts on this fight. We're going to talk about this on the Ringside Reporter podcast on Sunday, 7 p.m. Eastern Time. We're going to recap it. I hope you guys join us. Call in, give your opinion on the fight. Let me know what you guys think. Who do you have winning this fight on Saturday? Until next time, Bieber's out. Talk to y'all soon. Peace. Have a great day.